This is the pull-out kitchen I've built out the back of my van. It has running water, gas and plenty of storage. Everything I need for life on the road. In the last episode I made space for the unit by modifying the van, built the main carcass from ply, fitted the heavy-duty drawer slides and cut a hole in the worktop for the sink. Now it's time to bring it to life. In this episode I'll be plumbing in the tank, installing the gas and finishing everything properly.
If you're new here, this is the Atypical Workshop. I post DIY van conversion and renovation videos every other week. If you're enjoying these videos, please remember to like the video, subscribe and leave a comment.
I'm going to begin the episode by rectifying one of the mistakes I made last time out, and that was to cut the top piece too short. Now, I could cut a new top piece, but then the amount of effort required to do all of this routing again, I don't have the appetite for that. So I've got this bit of pine, some planed all round timber, and I think I'm going to trim the top back so that I can place this down in line, and then I'll also have to trim the thickness of this piece of timber down to 15mm so it matches here. Right, so I've got a bit of wood here and I've got the table saw set up, and I've also got the miter saw over here, and before I run it through the table saw I'm going to cut it to length. So I'm going to pop the stuff in there. Then I will need a pencil, a square, and I've got a tape measure around here, and I'm going to measure 830. I'm going to leave it very slightly long for the moment. 830. Is this going to be one of those moments where everything is exactly where it's supposed to be at all times and I don't have to go hunting for anything? I'd like to think so. Even the ear defenders are over here because I didn't put them down, I put them away. Right, get those on. Yeah. I've not plugged this in. I've got to turn the transformer on without losing focus with you. Great. So we can cut this. Excellent. So we've got this now. We need to cut it down to 15mm thick. But instead of measuring, I'm just going to grab a bit of 15mm ply. We need to plug this in, don't we? You know how in a kitchen people say you need your like triangle of appliances? I think I've just achieved that in a workshop setting. Everything is at arm's reach. Okay, so I'll put this bit of wood to the side. I'll take this, probably can't see that, so I'm just going to set the thickness exactly to that of a piece of 15mm ply. Now I need to take my piece of wood and I want to find or decide upon which is the nicer edge, and I think it's this one. So this one's going up against the fence and I'll cut through this, so this is the waste side. If you're cutting through something substantial, you normally want a nice thin blade in your saw. I'm going to raise the blade up to match the height. If it feels like it's going to struggle, I'll set the blade height to half and then I'll put it through in 2 passes. So now we've got our piece to go on the top. So the next thing I need to do is unscrew the top and then trim its depth so that this sits on the top and doesn't protrude out the front. Okay, so for the next part, I firstly need to measure the width of this board, which looks like it's about 43 millimeters, 43 mil. So basically I need to cut some off of here so that there is 45 mil showing. So I think the easiest thing to do is, well, I'm just going to measure it. Now, what I don't want to happen when I remove these screws is for everything to pop out of square again. So before I remove these screws, I'm going to put some new screws in further back. So you just want to make sure you set your depth here, because you don't want to be cutting all the way through the sides. So 15 mil, just fractionally over. And then that's going to sit on here like this. Not bad. I've also created a problem for myself here. This top is sagging in the middle, and now I can't really prop it up via the front. But actually that's not going to be an issue, because I'll be dividing the cupboard into sections, won't I? I'm going to have a piece running along here to support the edge of the sink that runs all the way back, and that should be enough to hold it all in place. So I've had an idea. This fit really well. I've trimmed it to length, but what I don't like is that the worktop looks too thin at 15 mil. So I'm going to use the offcut from when I trimmed it down, and I'm going to cut notches out of each end so it can slide underneath and give the appearance that the worktop's a thicker piece of plywood than it actually is. And the way that I'll achieve that is as follows. I'm going to put the second piece underneath, drop it down like this, get them lined up. It's really important here that we're precisely in the right place. There, that's really good, right there. And then I can take a pencil, preferably a sharper one than that, and then I'm going to trace the outline like this. So that's what we want to lose from each end, yeah? So now, if I've done this correctly, then this should slot in and actually just drop straight through like that. But I'll fix it to the other one, and then that one sits on there. It works like that. Look at that, beautiful. So I'll glue these two bits together, and then I can just put a very slight round over on these edges, and just from the front that looks substantially better. It looks much more robust, at least in my opinion it does. Let's glue these up then, shall we? So made sure they're in the right orientation. So I'm not going to use clamps. I've just got the nail gun here. Get it squeezed together. I might actually need one clamp just to hold it in place, make sure it doesn't kind of skid. Using the nail gun from the other side so I don't end up with visible nail gun marks, right? See, it's really, it wants to move a lot. This needs clamping. I've been doing a lot of thinking about gas bottle placement, and I've come to the conclusion that in this case simplicity really is the answer. I'm going to place it in the front of the kitchen like this, where the nozzle is accessible to turn on and off, and the distance between the tank and the hob is minimal. Due to space constraints, I'm using a Campingaz 904, and the downside to a Campingaz cylinder is that the regulators are screw on and off, whereas the Calagas ones are clip on, and that's a real downside to the Campingaz stuff. So if you just for a second consider that you've got all your gas lines attached, as soon as you want to demount this, you can't unscrew it all the way because the other end of this is hooked up to the hob over here. So I've purchased a quick release fitting specifically for gas that I can use to put one end on here. So I'm going to fit a tail onto here that's about this long, and then there'll be a longer tail between the other end of this connector and the hob, which means that whenever I need to switch out the canister because it's empty, I don't need to loosen any Jubilee clips. I just need to unmount it like that, and then I'm free to unscrew the regulator, switch out the tank, screw the regulator back on, and then easy as you like, connect up the gas lines. So I think I want to be quite liberal with the length of the return on the tail. I don't want to be bending it too aggressively. So I'm going to go with just under half of the, I think it's metre long piece of pipe that I've got. And before I do so, I just want to check that we've got ample between the hob and the connection, which we do. Yeah, lovely. That's fine. So then I'll demount the regulator. So firstly, I'm going to take the regulator and one end of the short pipe that I've cut, and then we'll get a Jubilee clip on there. Then remember to put your second Jubilee clip over the hose before you connect the pipe up to the connector. To just slip on. Yeah, look at that. There we go. Oh. There we go. And then that will cool and shrink back to its normal size. I've still got the Jubilee clip to fix on, but that's a much better way of doing it. Yeah, I think that this tail here is too long, because if I have it like that, then I'm just eating into the space I've got behind, and I also want this to be facing in this direction. So if I have it, the tank like that, and then I just have a shorter tail, then that might be easier. For the hole in the divider between the gas and the hob, I need to drill a hole large enough to accommodate both the pipe, the fitting, and the Jubilee clip. And to be certain, that's pretty much bang on. I'm going to go with the 28mm spade bit so that I know that it's going to clear. (202mm). Could probably do with being very slightly larger. Yeah, it needs to be a couple of millimeters larger, doesn't it? That's spot on. that's perfect. And the reason it's good is that it's not going to be able to move, but it can spin, and that will help with installation. So now that I've got that circle cut, I need to trim that bit of ply to a square to fit in here. And that is, I think it was 232. Yes. So let's dial it in now. I've got my circle cut out. I'm really happy with that. And now I need to decide where it's going to go in here. And I think I don't want it sat right at the bottom, because if I slam on the brakes, I feel as though it could still topple out of there. So what I'm going to do is set it slightly higher up. And the reason I'll do that is that the diameter of the canister is narrower at the bottom. So if I drop this into the circle, like so, that means that I can fix it in at this height. Then it's not going anywhere. There's still enough space to lift the canister out, and I think it's just quite minimal, and it's not too bad to look at either, is it? So I've got this in where I want it, and now I just need, that's going to be problematic, isn't it? This lines up with the height of the slider, which I don't want. So I think I'm going to have to put a piece in underneath and just raise it up by an amount. So I've got a bit of this, I don't know, it's like 3.5mm ply, and I'm going to cut one piece to size. That might be sufficient, and if not, I'll just cut two. And instead of messing around measuring again, I'm just going to take this out, pop that in the fence on the table saw, and I'll get an exact measurement. How's that looking? Yes, that's perfect. So when I do these, I don't want to be putting a screw in all the way along, because it will come out here, won't it? So I just want one front and back. Right, I'm just going to show you really quickly, because it's about to properly piss it down again. Quite soon I'll be doing all my varnishing, sanding, varnishing, etc. But before I do that, I've been spending a bit of time farting around, working out where all of my pipes are going to go. And part of that was attaching the wall clips to the side, so I've at least got the hole in there so I know where they're going to go, so that once everything's done, I can just hopefully slot everything into place. So I will cover all this in more detail, but right now I've got to get cleared up, get inside, and I don't know, just not do anything for a while. So I've got the kitchen out of the van, and that's going to allow me to do quite a few things that I wouldn't have been able to do in situ. Things such as the dividing panels. I wasn't able to fix these in place fully because the van obscured where all of the screws go. For example, here, this line of screws is completely obscured by the back bumper of the van. So with it in situ, I was not able to drive the screws in from underneath. And the same for this piece on the sort of back half. So that's one thing I can do whilst it's out. I'm also going to do lots of sanding and varnishing, and I'm also going to sort all of the plumbing whilst the kitchen's out, because all of the water pipes, tap, everything is contained within this section. So it doesn't matter if I'm not in the van whilst I'm doing this. Water tank, pipes, sink, taps, everything, all contained within this small box. In fact, I think that's the next thing I'm going to do. Get some holes drilled in this tank, because where I put the holes dictate where I drill a hole in this board once it's gone in. Once I've got the front attached to this kitchen, then I'm going to have the port for filling the tank up around here. So it makes logical sense to put the hole on this end of the tank, and it also seems sensible because it's on the other side of the tank to the feed. So it's really important to remember that the walls of these tanks are about 4mm thick. So when you're thinking about drilling into it, it's really crucial that you don't put your hole too close to the edge. So it's going to be a bit further in than you might initially have thought. And for my setup, my supply is going to be 15mm pipe. And I've got to allow for the fact that I've got this divider panel that's going to sit in here snugly up against the tank. So that's another reason that I don't want to be too close to this edge, because then this connector will be too close to the dividing panel. So I think I'm going to put my hole around about here. And then it's all good because I'm using plastic pipe. This can always be angled to how I want it, so that it comes out where I need it on the where you connect the hose up. I'm actually just going to take another look in here, because if I drop the camera in again, you've got the undrilled outlet that you can, when you order it, you can ask them to drill that out or not, but they manufacture them with the fitting already in there. And I think that if I'm putting my fitting here, that's going to possibly interfere with that. So I'm going to change my mind. So I've just drawn a line up from the center on the side, so I've got an idea of where that comes to, and that's basically where I need to avoid. So I think I'm going to come back to this side. It doesn't matter if I've got to use a slightly longer bit of pipe. So I reckon around about there. So I'm just now going to double check. If I stick the camera under again, you can see, because the tank is translucent, you can actually see where the tape is on the top of the tank. So that looks good from in there. And one other thing that's sensible to do is to take this nut and just check, like visually on here, is it sufficiently away from the sides? Yes. So that is where I'm going to put my hole. Then you want to take your bulkhead fitting and drop it through, and then your gasket's going to go on the inside. Now unfortunately I can't get my camera and my hands down there, so I'll just show you what it looks like when it's on. I do want to drop that in place like so, but it's going to be easier to take the gasket and the nut and drop my hand into the tank. I can only just reach. It's not ideal, this. I've got to kind of plonk it on and slide it along. However, I can do that, line it up, and then I'm going to push that on, and I'm actually going to rotate the bulkhead fitting initially rather than the nut. That's pretty easy to get nice and tight without using any tools. So that I'm pretty happy with. I'll probably get it a little bit tighter, but for the moment I'm going to leave it like that. So next up, I'm going to use some 15mm PEX barrier pipe. And of course, with the plastic pipe, you need to make sure you're using the 15mm pipe inserts. And that's going to push into here, like so. And we can always angle this. however we want. So I'm going to have it pointing off in this direction. I'm not putting the inserts in yet because I'm just farting around and making sure that everything's the right length. So I'll remember to add those in when I've finalised everything. So I'm going to take an elbow, plonk that into there, and then another piece here, like so, and then I'm going to feed that into the bulkhead, like so, and then I want to bring this along here, but if I do it completely horizontally, then I won't be able to because there's not enough space. So I'm going to have to do it slightly pointing upwards, or maybe I'll lengthen this and have it pointing slightly downwards. I'm not sure yet. Let's just try this for a second. I'm actually using the elbows from my kitchen sink, so I don't have any water in the house at the moment. So I've missed the cut-off time for screw fix on a Sunday. Plonk that down there. What's quite nice about all of this is that once I've got the pipe coming along here and I've put a pipe clip on, then this part of the pipe here is actually supported by the elbow itself, so there shouldn't be anything moving around once the tank is also fixed down in place. So I'm actually going to be using an identical bulkhead fitting on the other end because it's going to allow me to pop it through the front here and then actually attach a hose fitting like so, and then when I want to fill it up I just got to clip a hose on. But because this is also an elbow, then it looks as though this approach of coming off the tank and moving upwards might be not so good because it's going to force me to have this further down, so I've got to come along here and then drop it down. Whereas if I lengthen this piece so that it allows me to have it point downwards rather than upwards, then I can do the reverse. I can come along here and then come back up into the bulkhead fitting. So now I can take this one, push it in there, and then I'm going to have to cut that to, well, let's think about this. I've got to take the nut. Gasket's not really as important here, is it? Because it's not actually going through the wall of a tank, it's just going through a bit of plywood. So we'll remove that. And I've got to think about how this is going to work. My plywood is going to be inside. It's not going to sit over the front, it's going to sit inside of here. So I can actually mark out like so. And then I'll also extend that line up the side. There we go. So now we can see where this wants to go. So there's going to be a hole through here. So that's going to come to there, isn't it? And it will want to be in this orientation. With most of the plumbing laid out, now was the perfect time to sand, seal and varnish the drawer. I have to be realistic, really, don't I? This is cheap hardwood plywood. There's nothing special about it. I'm never going to make it perfect. It's not birch ply, but I can improve it. I'm going to use a shellac to raise the grain and sand it back and get it smoother, and then use some varnish, and hopefully that process will also sort of make the grain pop a little bit more and possibly hide some of the defects that are just a reality of this kind of ply. The main drawback is that the top veneer on the cheaper plywoods is so thin that if you catch a slight edge with your sander, then you just take it off completely. And I've done that in a few places. But as I said, I'm working with what I've got. I'm making the most of some cheap plywood. When I did all the finishing on the sliding bed frame, I started out by using a mixture of some rust-in sanding sealer with a small amount of methylated spirits so that it wasn't so thick and dried a bit more quickly. But this time, my intention is to use this shellac. It's a bit of a mystery. I think It came out of Dan's mum's house and it was sitting around and he wondered if I wanted it. And I'm intrigued, we all are, by what specifically is Mixture Z. Well, I guess we're about to find out, aren't we? Yeah, that certainly smells like a shellac. Quite a strong one at that. Fucking hell, that's dark. Crikey. Okay, I've got the methylated spirit, which I am going to mix with this lovely Mixture Z later. But first, I'm going to use some white spirit on a cloth. I'll take all of the plumbing and fixtures out of the cupboard. Now, this is a really thick shellac, so likely wants thinning. I'm going to do 3 parts methylated spirit to 1 part of this shellac, and I'll give that a good stir. I'm wondering if it wants a smidge more. I think this is going to have the effect of darkening the wood quite a lot. I'm going to use this board here, which could be a good thing. I think it could look quite cool. From past experience, I really want to be applying this really thinly because otherwise it just takes absolutely forever to dry. So we're gonna leave that. So I've left this for about 45 minutes and it seems as though this Mixture Z is working quite differently to the Rustin shellac that I used previously. Maybe I've watered it down with more methylated spirits, but I've just given this side a light sand with the 240 and it's taken it back to smooth. You want it to be, if it feels slightly hairy, that's good. It means that it's raised the grain and you can smooth that back. And yeah, previously when I was doing the bed, the sanding disc ended up really clogged up. You can see small bits on here where it's slightly clogged, so maybe I could leave it another 20 minutes before I do the top. But overall, yeah, it's working quite well, and it hasn't lost the slight tint that it's gained from applying the shellac. So I might do one more coat, a thin coat of shellac, and then move on to varnish. When I ordered the tank, I hadn't considered what kind of a pump I was going to use. So I had this hole drilled out, and because I'm using a submersible pump, I need to use a bulkhead through the tank like I've used for the inlet. So this is actually not going to be used, and I will need to close that off, which I can't do yet because I don't have the part. But I have marked out where I'm going to drill the hole for the bulkhead, which will sit here. And once again, I'm going to drill using a small pilot hole first. But since this is where I've marked it out to go, but since the wall of the tank is curved, I'm just having a look up through, and this is really close to the edge, and I'm worried it won't fully seal. So I am going to move it to there. Now that that's in and nicely tightened up, I've got the submersible pump to go in, and on the other end, so it's, as you saw, I've pushed that on, and I think now it's cooled down. I think that's really solid. It shouldn't, I think it's pretty airtight. And then just make sure you put your pipe insert on the other end. And then I'm going to drop the pump into the tank and then just push that into place like this. Right, I think I'm finally ready to fill up the tank and see if it holds its water. I've kind of done a temporary setup outside the van because this isn't yet ready to go back in because it still needs varnishing. But I've added a tail onto here to make it easier to test rather than having to add the sink on top, because once you add the worktop on, you've got less visibility and it's harder to find leaks. I'm going to have to do a bit of trusting because it's just me here. So I'm going to have to fit that on first, then run around there and turn on the tap and come back. And then I'll also, assuming there are no leaks straight away, I'll need to turn it off before it's full. So should we give that a go? Okay, so one last little check here. All of our isolator valves are closed, which is important. I'm going to need to hook up the pump with some 12 volt. I'll get the neutral hooked up, ready to plug that in to power the pump. You watch this, I'll get the tap on. Apart from the disgusting stuff in the hose, putting horrible crap in my tank, I see no leaks so far. I'm going to have to wash that out, aren't I? I'm going to turn it off now. Okay, so under here, that seems dry. Nothing leaking out here. I think we're good. So now we're going to need, well, we'll pop the pump on and open a valve at the same time, shall we? Power on the pump. Open the valve. 1, 2. We've got water coming out. And I don't see water anywhere else. Right, well, I can see there's a leak, and it's almost certainly this. Alright, it looks like we might be leak free. I had to take it off and centre the gasket. I think the gasket wasn't quite central over the fitting, and the trouble is the hole is probably larger than ideal, and the gasket's internal diameter is a mil larger than the diameter of the thread, so there's not much leeway, but that stayed dry for a whole tank's worth of water. With the water system leak free, I turned my attention to the electrics. Now with the water system, it's all contained within the drawer that pulls in and out. As long as the tank is in that drawer too, nothing's really moving. It's not quite the same with the electrics, however. The issue here is that the electrical cupboard is fixed, but the kitchen drawer moves. So I need to find a way to run a cable between them that won't snag, stretch, or get caught when the drawer slides in and out. To solve that, I'm using a drag chain cable carrier, the kind you see on 3D printers or CNC machines. It guides the cable through a controlled loop so it moves smoothly with the drawer and keeps everything out the way. The cables I've got so far, this is the feed from the battery, from the loader battery. So that one will go in there. But before I slot it in, I'm just going to attach, well, you can use Wago connectors. If you've got some, use them. They are better. They're just a bit more, useful, I'd say. But you can get ideal connectors from, I think, Toolstation and Screwfix now. They're a fraction of the price. So if you don't already have Wago connectors, then buy ideal connectors. They do exactly the same thing, fraction of the cost. So as I said, here is my power from the leisure battery. So I'm going to pop a Wago connector onto each. So one onto the positive and one on to the negative, or like so. Then I've got this one here, and this is coming from the pump. So all we're going to do here is hook up the negative, which is the blue, and that's going to go in with the black one. And then the way this works is if I just hook these up, then it would power the pump, but then the pump would be on all the time. So that's where the tap is introduced. So if I now drop the sink in, I'm not I've not really put that in the best place, have I? I think I might move it over here. So now this tank, hopefully for the last time, though I don't really believe that as I say it, can drop back down like so. Then I've got this bit of old chopping board that I can screw in here that stops it from jumping up. I should probably leave that bit out for the moment if I'm, as I say, not convinced that's the last time the tank's coming out. But anyway, that's in now. And now I can run this through the new hole I made. Poke it through here. I'm going to leave it this long because it's good to have plenty of excess, considering that this is going to be used and I need to be able to turn it all the way around without yanking it out from here. Okay, so now we got the box in the right place, I can get this back in. So let's pull that through to how we wanted it. So that's going to slot in. I think we'll leave it. We can have the Wago connectors right at the end, so that's good. So I'll push that in like that. So there we go, that's where I need to strip it back to, and this here is how long that it needs to be in total. Then we're going to get our tails, and again there. So that's ready. Then the negative we said goes in like this with the negative. That's nice. And now once again I'll drop the sink back in, and hopefully this time we'll be able to see what we're actually doing. Right, so this is just going to come in. I'm going to tuck it in like this. It's always going to fall out. So why don't I just wire it in now? The live from the battery, we're going to put one of the tails from the tap into there. Close it. Then the other one is going to link up with the live from the pump. Okay, so what we've got here is black cable is from our fuse box with our positive and negative. Then you join up the negative to the negative of the pump, and then you put one of the tap tails into the supply from the fuse box, and then the other one goes in directly into the pump. So then when you power on the tap, it connects the circuit. So you've got power coming permanently up through this one. You turn the tap on and then it connects the circuit. Power comes down through this one and then out into the pump, which fires up the pump. So we're going to get these ones in first, tuck them in, tuck that in and tuck that in. And then they're going to sit in the box like that. And then there we go. And that is wired. Let's clip our pipe back in. We've got to hook it up here. God, nothing feels like it fits as well as it used to. Okay, so that's all in. Now we can pop the sink in, hook up this, and that's in. I've got to clip those in, but I'm still not convinced I'm not going to have to take it all out, so I'm leaving that for the moment. So all that's left to do now is drill a hole through the side of the electrical cupboard and wire the other end into the fuse box. I've got one spare, slot here.
So with the electrics wired and the pump tested, there was one last thing to do on this project, and that was to drop the sink into place and stick it down for good.
Right, so the first thing I think I need to do here is lift the sink out and then use some methylated spirit just to clean, make sure everything is grease free, sawdust free, etc. There we go. Yeah. So if you wipe things down with it, it will dry really fast.
The sticking down part, well, that was the easy bit. I used OB1 and it was just really straightforward. You run 4 beads around the edge and you drop the sink in. And this is probably one of the only things I would have changed about the project. Now, I recessed the sink so it was nice and flush, and although it looks really nice, it made it a bit of a nightmare to stick down, because not only do you stick it down, but you need to run that bead around the top, and that was really challenging. I don't have much footage, it was a bit messy, I needed help to sort it out, so we'll kind of just leave it at that. Don't take advice from me on using sealants and doing a nice job, because I'm not very good at it. So that's why I'm not going into too much depth. But with that done, well, I guess let's move on to an outro. So there you have it. The pull-out kitchen now has running water, gas, and a proper finish. It's fully functional and ready to use. There are 2 more videos coming up to round off this mini-series. One is all about the things I wish I knew before buying the water tank, from all the fittings I bought to cost surprises, because it did add up. And the other one, just refer to my notes, I'm not going to pretend that I'm doing this by heart. The other is a full cost breakdown of the entire van kitchen build. So yeah, I'll be completely transparent, so you've got a good idea of what you're letting yourself in for. But that's all to come. I'm aiming to put my videos out fortnightly to give myself a chance to actually give you consistent videos, because weekly, I've been doing this for 4 years and I am not capable of sticking to a weekly schedule. I can do it for sort of 8 videos in a row, and then you don't see me for 6 months. So I'm hoping fortnightly will be the answer. But yeah, thank you for watching. I'll see you next time.